Our simple cloud-based platform helps automate your workflow, empowering you to serve your investors and raise more capital with unrivaled efficiency. Invest more and manage less with AppFolio Investment Management.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Realcomm Live. I am again excited to be here. Our weekly newscast is picking up some momentum. We're having a lot of fun, and we get a chance to talk to some incredible people. And that is no different this week. We've got two phenomenal guests on board for today's issue or segment. The first is Tama Huang, the Chief Innovation Officer for CohnReznick. And our second guest is going to be Emmanuel Daniels, who's the Director of Industry Innovation, Smart Building and Campuses for Microsoft. Two incredibly bright world travel people, and are going to be offering us some great perspective on real estate technology, smart buildings, where we are with COVID, and most importantly, where they think we're going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. So with that, I'd like to bring on our first guest, Tama. Tama, how are you?
Oh, very well, thanks.
It is so good. My globe-trotting friend, how are you?
I'm grounded, that's what I am.
Not a lot of traveling these days, huh?
Right now, only through the screen.
Well, I'm actually getting ready to get on an airplane Saturday morning, getting ready to head to Denver for our hybrid event, which will be mostly, as you know, online. But we're going to be setting up a studio and actually broadcasting different components. Didn't know what a hybrid was a few months ago, but and I'm still not sure I do, but we're going to give it a go. And
yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Exciting times. So, as you said, world turned upside down, right? February, March, things just changed overnight, and still, kind of unfamiliar grounds. So you and I, for the last few years, have been talking a lot about smart buildings and what do they mean? They're for energy efficiency, they're for operational efficiency. And boom, all of a sudden they're about health and wellness, right? Can you tell me a little bit about how your perspective has pivoted at all, or have things changed as far as how you view the technology that's going into our buildings?
I think that nothing has changed fundamentally. I think our vantage shifted, or priorities may have shifted. So, we've always thought of smart buildings as in layers, right? Your first layer is just simple, smart and informed. We're connected. We have sensors that have been put in. Secondly to that, we go to smart and direct. So now we can actually do something with the information that we're gathering. And then third, we go to smart and control. We're now increasing HVAC. We're now, turning up heat as we sense the population's changing. The last two to us kind of, being able to augment our business processes as well as starting to enhance and add value. Those, I would say today, are aspirational, but just as important. And whereas in the past, we've been place-driven in our thinking, so we're building up, just like as described. Today, I think we're pivoting and we're coming down from the top. So, we went from smart buildings to safe buildings. We're moving to healthy buildings. And ultimately, I believe what we need to get to is something that's going to resemble trusted buildings. We need to build that trust. And that trust is only going to come if we're purpose-driven, if we actually get to the why, not just the how and the what.
Well, that brings up a good point. So we were on this path to digital transformation last 15, 20 years, right? And all of a sudden, COVID hits, and the entire world, or most of the world, gets thrown into their homes and has been forced to learn how to work from home. And even those CEO executive leadership that were not sure it would work, they had no choice, right? So all of a sudden now the home is an extension of the office. The office, we're not quite sure why people are going to want to go back there. Technology's got a role. What is this place, the combination of what we do at home, what we do on the road with our laptops, and what we do in the office, and then layering in the behavioral issues. I mean, do we go into the work 5 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week? What does the office workplace look like from a technology and a behavior standpoint going forward?
I think the biggest thing to me is don't compete, right? Extend and expand the home office. Don't try and compete with it. You know, quite honestly, over the last 7 months, 9 months, what have you, we as consumers of space have created a relationship with Microsoft Teams and Zoom as opposed to our landlords, right? So there's a real shift in thinking about place and what that means, and needing to think of every interaction that we have, both in a physical world as well as in a digital world.
Right. Now, when in prep for this, we were talking about, you had some incredible statistics as it relates to retail spending and people's, readiness to go back. Can you share a little bit about those data points, and what do you think they mean for, say, first quarter next year and actually all throughout 2021?
Yeah, and this is research that has come from BCG as well as from McKinsey, but there's some fundamental shifts that we're starting to detect in consumer behavior. One is a shift to value, right? So really, discretionary spend is down, which is understandable given the economic crisis that we're in. There's been a flight to digital just by virtue of we're staying home, right? There's a homebody economy, if you will, that has evolved. But the big one to me is really, a shock to loyalty, right? So 77% of Americans have engaged in either a new way of shopping or have tried a new brand. And that's an amazing statistic. Now, it's for Gen Z or younger, it is 89%. 9 out of 10 Americans have tried something they've never tried before, either a new brand or a new way of shopping. And I think because of that, everything's up for grabs. So, companies need to figure out new ways of connecting, whether you're a landlord, whether you're a retailer, whatever it is, you need to find new ways of connecting. And the one element that has kind of trickled in is what McKinsey calls a caring economy. It's not only what you sell or what you do, but how you do it that matters. We are looking not only at, are your products good, but are you good? How you treat your employees? What is your reaction in terms of social justice? How are you responding to climate change? All of those things starting to matter now, and it really becomes more holistic.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, and if you think about these paradigms have been going on for years, but all of a sudden you fast track these paradigms, and what should take place in 3 to 5 years is taking place literally in 6 months to a year. And
Absolutely.
it's a shock to the system. So let's go back to the smart building conversation a little bit. You and I have both been in the game for a long time. We understand the complexities of building network, IoT devices, complex integration of systems, pushing to analytics, machines talking to machines. We first started, as you said, to do it for energy. Then we did operational efficiency, wellness. With COVID, I mean, we're going to have incredible COVID technologies at our hybrid event. One is a symptom sense where you walk through the device like you do at the airport. This thing takes blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, and blood oxygenation level just by walking through a scanner. Okay. To me, that also, what about medical privacy? What about privacy in general? What happens when that device is hooked up to to the network, and every door you walk through is taking your temperature? And now people say, well, that's so far away. Well, let's now pivot to China, where you and I have had conversations about the QR code, right? How do we deal with the level of sophisticated technology that we're dealing with now? And the fact that people are moving to make decisions much quicker because of a pandemic. Where does privacy sit in this? And is it inevitable that everybody will be walking around with devices that tells where they are, who they are, how they're feeling? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a tough one, Jim, and it's going to be different for, I think, every sector, every geography, every country, every political regime, if you will. But in preparation for this, I actually connected with our folks in Hong Kong, out of the Hong Kong office, and just said, hey, how are things going? And what has been your experience here? And Hong Kong talks about 3 waves, right? The first wave was the wave from China, which happened Chinese New Year, end of January, early February. Second wave happened, which they call kind of like the influx from Western countries, because spring break, right, March, April, all the students had to come home because universities shut down. So flights from London, flights from LA were starting to bring the students home and the parents that went to get the students home. And the third wave is really the community spread that they then experienced kind of in the July timeframe. But what happened there was every step of the way, the surveillance was kind of kicked up a notch, if you will. Right. In the beginning, it was just screening that the things that are happening everywhere, and now they're bracelets, right? So in China, what you have is the health code, or the 健康码, which is basically a QR code that is on your phone. If you're not green, you do not get to buy a bus ticket, a train ticket. You do not get to take a taxi. You do not get to enter a building. You do not get to enter a store. Right. So that green code on your app is more valuable than a passport. You cannot move without it. So in Hong Kong, what the bracelets were doing was just geofencing. We don't know where you are. We just know how far you've gone for what you told us.
But the point is, you introduce a concept like that in a country 1.4 billion people. It gets accepted for the health and safety results of COVID. But once COVID is gone, you take social credit scoring data and you replace the COVID application with social credit. And now you don't get a bus ticket because you didn't meet some social guideline inside the algorithm. That's a slippery slope.
Yeah. And probably happening already, Jim.
Yeah.
There's nothing preventing that from happening. But I would say that we might not be that far behind. It's just that for us, it's not a government doing it.
Right. It's not as connected. So the conversation goes: real estate technology, smart buildings, 4 or 5 reasons, health and wellness, COVID, all of this being compressed into a 6-month period, the technology being developed at a pace never before seen in China. What does the world look like 12 months from now?
I think what you're going to see is, you're talking about scanners, which are infrastructure pieces, all the way down to wearables, right? So we are going to be pushing the technology out further and down further in terms of the consumer. We're going to have wearables that are detecting things that are going to get reported up. I think from a technology perspective, we actually have to shift and stop thinking about prop tech and think about purpose tech.
Purpose tech, yeah. I totally agree, because the technology inside out the building has got to be ubiquitous. There's not going to be a doorway. It needs to be flowed seamlessly. And then, like we've been talking about at Realcomm for about 11 years now, is the privacy conversation in Western democracies has got to be had. You can't ignore it. And then let the debate take place and figure out how far we want to take this. And, the question is, can we have all the efficiency and the safety with holding on to some semblance of privacy?
And you're going to push it out. It's going to push out from the building to the public transportation system of how did you get there. It's going to push out to where did you come from.
Right.
Those boundaries that we used to have, which is this is a building, this is a sidewalk, this is a restaurant, this is the taxi stand or what have you, this is an airplane, this is the airport. All of that's going to go away, because we want to know where you come from, who are you with.
Right, exactly. All right. Well, as always, an incredibly fascinating conversation. I love chatting with you. Hurts my brain when we're done, but that's a good thing. Critical thinking, pushing the envelope. I really appreciate your insight and taking the time to do this today.
Thank you very much, Jim.
We will see you. Be well.
Same to you.
Take care. All right. Tama, one of the most fascinating people I know, always incredible insight. Her globetrotting allows her to see things all over the world. All right. With that, I'd like to do a quick thank you to one of our sponsors, BearTech. All right. Just want to say thank you to our sponsors. We can't do this without you, and they allow this education, this collaboration to go on. All right. Our second segment guest, Emmanuel Daniel, a good friend, another globetrotter. His journey in the smart building, smart campus world started in Sharjah, which is a city next to Dubai. He then pivoted to Singapore, one of my favorite cities in the world, and one who's always been at the top of innovation, and now has landed at Microsoft and is responsible for the smart campus that's being erected as we speak. So before we bring Emmanuel on, we're going to show you a short video, and then he's going to join us.
One of the best things about the technology is the all-encompassing view I have of my entire portfolio. Now I can optimize my resources and make data-driven decisions. This empowers me to plan proactively for the future and run operations seamlessly. Smart, intelligent, sustainable. Optimizing the way we operate our buildings and in the long run, saving us money, helping us maintain fiscal discipline.
All right, let's bring on Emmanuel. All right, there you are, sir. How are you?
Hello, Jim. How are you doing? Absolutely fine.
Good. Another globe-trotting friend. Although you're settled a little bit in Redmond these days, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
So everything going well with the project?
Oh, things are going well. It's been phenomenally busy, but we are progressing. We're headed in the right direction, and going really well.
So before we get into the status of what could conceivably be one of the biggest digital transformation projects on the planet, can you just give us a little rundown on how things were going in January and February, and then March came? How has your life changed, and how has life at Microsoft changed, and how has life on the project changed? Just give us a little bit of a reality check on what your world's been like.
Sure. I think what has happened is the current situation has forced us to take a look as what is the role of space and the overall built environment. When we started, we were designing spaces assuming that people would come, that they would use the space, use it for working, use it for collaboration. But then when the pandemic hit, the change has been how is space now going to be used as and when needed for a specific purpose at a specific point in time. So
Right.
what this led us to do was we then said, hey, hold on, we had all these experiences that we've defined and the journeys of people coming in, looking at their behaviors and catering to it. But what happens if those behaviors are not continuous and they happen at moments in time? How do we ensure that this space can now be made more effective and people can be made more productive? Because we're not looking at 8 hours or 10 hours of a day. It is that point in time where they want to use that space for a specific engagement activity or the specific empowerment activity. So that's caused us to relook at how experiences in spaces are going to be consumed. But outside of that, Jim, the way we were looking at it is causing us a change just to look at how experiences are going to be consumed. But the data, the infrastructure, the elements that go into making that space productive, empowered, and suiting your needs has to remain the same.
Right. So, I mean, if you think about how we were living, in January, X% of the workforce, mobile, laptops, running around the world, meeting clients, having meetings, X% of the workforce, driving on the freeway, taking the subways to a building. It was an ebb and flow of mobile and in-place workers. Now we go into this crash course for the last 6 months of working almost exclusively out of homes. And then as these offices reopen, is it 2 days a week, 1 day a week, 4 days a week? Are we now expected to be, at our desks, if you will, Monday through Friday again? How is Microsoft viewing that ebb and flow relationship between mobility, either on the road or at home, and what goes on in the office?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. And, and the reason it becomes really critical for us when we are building and raising up a new campus is the question. Times have changed and the way people work have changed. It's not about coming to the office to work. I can work from literally anywhere. How
Right.
do I ensure I design a space that makes it the most attractive option for people to come and work to get their task or job done? And now, when we thought about this, we then said, okay, people can work from home. Home is comfortable. Home is very relaxed. What are the motivational factors for them to come to the office, and how do they have control over that space that they can't have in a park, in a coffee shop, in their home, in their car? how is this space going to be different? And how do we drive engagement of human beings? Because ultimately, you come there to make a connection. You can have all the other ways of working, but then in that space, how do I drive that connection? How do I drive those accidental discoveries or those enablers of productivity, which can only happen in a physical space when we have people walking around or moving around? So we see this as an augmentation or enhancement of people's productivity, where they have the flexibility to work from wherever they want. But if you have a specific need or a specific requirement, this space would be able to cater to that needs. And that's where our concept of dynamic spaces starts to fit in, where the space can adapt to the needs of its users, and the users are then empowered to carry out their activities in a much more productive manner.
Right. Well, and then if you think about that, we're all on these meetings, 10 frames, little cubes of people. And you think about when you do go back into that office to have that collaborative meeting with the group, right? But only half the group can make it in. And so that video conferencing is no longer a 60-inch screen on the wall, it's the entire wall.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, why? Well, first of all, I can interact with Emmanuel much better if we're at scale. If I'm around, 5'11", 6 feet, and he's about 6'1", if I see him standing up on a wall next to me and we can have, a conversation as if he's in the same room, that increases the communications, right? That improves the communications.
Yeah.
So it's just like in the old days, we all went into the office because that's where the expensive photocopier was. Now I want to go into the office because that's where the expensive immersive experience are, right? How much are you guys thinking about playing around with, what is an immersive experience of bringing people from the outside into the physical space? Are you working on that?
Oh yeah, a lot of it, and I think you said it really, really well, Jim. The goal is, it is not about forcing people and confining them to a space. It's about making the space open digitally or physically, so anybody from anywhere can participate equally in a meeting, be heard, be understood, and be able to showcase their ideas. So for us, it's about engaging. I think if you have a screen, is it only the screen? Is it about the touch interfaces on that screen? Is it about physical interfaces or physical cues that comes as an outcome of AV technology? Is it about audio clues? Is it about environmental clues? Now, even in space with someone sitting outside, how do we bring the outside environment into that space so they're more connected, they're more relaxed, they're more understood? So bringing all these elements in, and I think the key to us has been to understand it is not about having meeting in a single space. It's about having a meeting anywhere, but creating that experience powered by technology to make people feel they're sitting right next to each other. And this is
Yep.
an amazing way to collaborate, right? Taking those barriers of space and distance away.
I mean, and these ideas are not new. I mean, we've been doing teleporting, telepresence for 20 years. Hasn't been widely adopted, but I predict in the next 24 months, creating 3D virtual environments where it's like people feel like they're in the room, making that space blend, the digital and the physical blend. I think is really going to be what we're going to see in the next 3-4 years.
Oh, yes,
We
absolutely.
we only have a couple minutes left, and I would like to go back to the conversation I had with Tom on this privacy issue. Obviously, things going across the world are different than they are here. We know we have the technology to do that. You and I have talked about creating these environments, these immersive experiences, these new places, but also that privacy remains an important issue. Where does Microsoft stand? When you come to the campus, will you feel like you're being watched and tracked all the time, or are you taking privacy into consideration with all these digital plans?
Oh yeah, I think it goes without saying. Privacy, security, and trust are key foundational pillars of our design. And why is that important? If I have to consume a service, let's take an integrated service of me waking up in the morning, deciding how I want to get to work, getting to the building, parking my car, accessing the building, having a meeting, being productive, going out, grabbing a coffee, and getting back home. The amount of handovers that occurs as an outcome of the systems that are involved is phenomenal. Now, if someone has to use the experience, the success for me is as the owner of the building. Yes, he's used the experience, okay, he's consumed the data, and I've empowered him to be more productive. That'll only work if he trusts that the data that I'm capturing is only relevant for the experience that's being offered to him. Now, the moment I break that trust, I can have millions of devices in the buildings. No one would turn up because they don't believe that I'm using the data for the right purposes. So each of the experiences that we go through a very stringent privacy review, a stringent ethics review. The devices that we have are we go through a phenomenal certification process to ensure that these devices are secure on our network. Because the goal for us is not to make it about technology, but to ensure the building is trustworthy. So you are in that building, you're comfortable, you're confident and relaxed to be more productive.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think there are two different views globally on a smart building, a smart city, and a smart world. One cares about privacy and the other does not. And so I think the next few years are going to be critical in understanding what the future of the globe looks like, because the technology is here. There's no doubt. How we use it and how we use it for its benefits, but we also allow humans to be humans and be free. I think it's a very important discussion, one that I want to bring you back and maybe get Tom and a couple other people, and we'll have a group discussion. I know we're going to be talking about this at our hybrid event. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I really appreciate your candor. And I really like Microsoft's approach to bring in the benefits, but also making sure you don't push it a little bit too far. So,
absolutely, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time and your support. You've been a great friend of Realcomm, and we look forward to continuing working with you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay. You be well. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye. All right, boy, two great guests. I mean, smart, global travel, so much context, and really don't just look at the topics at a top level, but dig deep for all those unintended consequences as we develop our world of smart buildings and smart cities. So, all right, with that, I would like to bring in our last sponsor. Altus has been a lifelong supporter of Realcomm, and I want to say thank you for that. And let's take a moment and hear what they've got to say.
Altus Group's software, data, and advisory services help bring the clarity, perspective, and insights you need to minimize the risk and maximize the value of your investments. Because it's not simply how much data you have, it's how clearly you see it.
All right, and now for our final segment, our weekly news brief. We've got Howard Berger with us today, and Howard's going to bring us up to speed on what the news is this week. He's taken over for Sherry. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Thank you, Jim.
And so lots going on, right? And you're involved in the process of choosing this weekly news. It goes a little bit of computer and a little bit of human. What do you got for us this week? What stands out?
Well, here's a couple of teasers from this week's weekly news briefing. So top story, Intel Smart PTK1 campus. Now it's been open about a year. Intel took 3,000 employees scattered across 8 buildings and 5 campuses in Petah Tikva, Israel, centralized operations, created new design development center, really focused on user experience. Here's a few factoids. 14,000 sensors monitoring lighting, temperature, and occupancy, some 500 displays, over 1,900 kilometers of fiber and cable, supplying 50 to 100 terabytes a day of data collected. Amazing. What they've achieved, 40% higher energy efficiency than a normal building, 75% less water consumption, and 100% of the building is going to be provided by renewable resources. So this project is going to be one of 15 innovative smart building projects that we're going to be featuring at the Realcomm IBCon Smart Building Best Practice Showcase during our virtual conference. And this is going to be on October 27th. Also in the news, we have an article about how private wireless networks, including CBRS, making their way into buildings, possibly displacing Wi-Fi in a wide range of applications.
Yep.
Also, just announced Acuity Brands, always on the leading edge of innovation. They just announced an agreement with Violet Defense and Puro Lighting to incorporate UV germicidal lighting in their fixtures in the battle with COVID. On a serious note, Meta Transportation Institute from San Jose University, they surveyed 90 transit agency technology leaders, and while 80% of them felt that they were prepared for a cyber threat, only 43% of them really had a sufficient program in place, and that should be a wake-up call for all of us. So I just want to add, before I close out, that the topic of cyber for operational technologies is going to be front and center at our Realcomm IBCon virtual conference in our cybersecurity forum, which is going to be the morning of October 26th. So that's a wrap for me.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the process we go through to get this news, thousands of stories down to 100, down to 50, down to 20, and then the humans take over and try to get the relevant ones. It's not an easy task, but hopefully the industry realizes the value that we sift literally globally. And for you to take the top 2, 3 and present them on the show is wonderful. And I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Jim. And just to note, the weekly news briefing comes out Thursday morning, every Thursday morning. So keep an eye out for it. And thank you.
Awesome. Be well. All right, that wraps it for this week. Gosh, 2 great guests, a wrap on the weekly news. Hopefully this half hour provides some legitimate value. And as I always say, please let us know the stories you're looking at. If you got some leads on some interesting things, Howard had to go all the way over to India to get that project from Intel. We literally are looking around the world. And most importantly, your input, your suggestions are what's going to be making this show even better. So with that, I'd like to say goodbye and looking forward to next week's show, where we have Jesse Carrillo from Heinz and Denise Taylor will be joining us as well. And it's looking to be an exciting show, and looking forward to seeing you again next week. So with that, have a great weekend.